Hi, this is section 1.4. Section 1.2, we did quadratic equations that were not complex. 1.3, we did them with when they were complex. Now 1.4 is kind of like what I call a hodgepodge. Some of them are still dealing with quadratic equations, but they don't look like that initially anyway. And the reason I call it a hodgepodge is because there's in this section, it's like three different things that we're focusing in on. One of them is radical equations, one of them is solving by substitution, and one of them is solving by grouping. Again, I go in a lot more detail in class with this, so definitely come to the lectures. The square root of 12 minus x equals x. Looks like nothing you would see in 1.2 and 1.3. But now notice the very first step, what I'm going to do. To solve a radical equation, you got to get rid of the radical. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to square both sides. So you get the square root of 12 minus x squared is 12 minus x. So the reason you square the square root is to eliminate it. And that equals x squared. So now it's definitely quadratic. So one little step made it a quadratic. So this becomes x squared plus x minus 12 equals 0. Notice how I brought everything to the right instead of everything to the left because I wanted to keep the x squared positive. And this one actually factors, and it factors to x plus 4, x minus 3 equals 0. And so x equals negative 4 in this case, and x equals 3 in this case. But if this problem was actually in the book, they would only give you one answer. The only answer they would give you is the 3. And you're like, why not the negative 4? It appears to work. Yes, it appears to work, but it doesn't. If you look at the original problem without the squares, that was the original problem. And 3 would definitely work because 12 minus 3 is 9. The square root of 9 does give me the 3. And that's fine. But look at the negative 4. When you put negative 4 back in here, 12 minus a negative 4 is 16. And the square root of 16 is not negative 4, because that's what x is in this particular case. So you cannot take the square root of something and get negative 4. It's called the principal square root, which means it's always positive. So when that number was negative 4, I knew it wasn't going to work at the very beginning, because whatever comes out of this has to be positive, or at least not negative anyway. So anyway, so 3 is the answer, and negative 4 doesn't appear to work, even though it appears to solve the equation here. So, but it doesn't work in the original problem. And like I said, we'll say in class that is called an extraneous solution, but 3 is the actual solution. So now example 2 is solving by substitution. And like we did in class, I will use a dummy variable. The reason what I like to use is the delta. And that makes delta squared x to the 1/2. And then you replace, that's what's called substitution, you replace these two with the deltas. So it becomes delta squared minus delta minus 6 equals 0. So, and then you factor this thing out. So it would be delta minus 3 times delta plus 2 equals 0. So delta equals 3, delta equals negative 2, similarly like I did over here. Then you go back and you put the delta back in. So it's x to the 1/4 equals 3, and x to the 1/4 equals negative 2. Now, everything seems doable right now, but a lot of people will get stuck right here because they don't know what x to the 1/4 is. X to the 1/4 happens to be the 4th root of x. Think of this, the 1/4 as the ground. This is the 4th root. Roots are below the ground. Powers are above the ground. So the sun's up there. The sun gives us power, and the roots are underneath the ground. It's a silly way to remember it, but that's why I've always remembered it. So it's the 4th root, because roots are below the ground. So it's the 4th root of x. So what I'll do, so the 4th root of x equals 3, and the 4th root of x equals negative 2. And we talked about that a while ago. You cannot have a root and give you negative 2. Well, at least leave the root. 4th root cannot give you that. But if you try to do it, this was the 4th power, and so x is equals to 81. And on this one, x equals 16. Well, at least it appears to be anyway when you take the 4th power, but it doesn't work because you cannot take a 4th root of 16 and get negative 2. 4th root of 16 is equals to positive. So again, this is extraneous. 81 is my actual answer. Okay, and then the last possible is the grouping one. And the grouping one is just basically group the first two, group the last two, and take out what they have in common. So the first two has an x squared, so it's x plus 4. And the next one has a negative 1, that's really all they got. So it's x plus 4. So we factor out an x plus 4 here, because this one has an x plus 4, so does that one. So we factor that out. So we are basically factoring out a binomial instead of a monomial, which is what we usually do. And then this becomes x squared minus 1, because that's what remains. And then since you factor these, you set those factors equal to 0 like we did over here. So x plus 4 equal to 0, and x squared minus 1 equal to 0. And I will leave that the rest of it up to you to how to figure that out. I will tell you the answers to these real quick. It's negative 4, 1, and negative 1. Those are the 3 answers. I'll leave it up to you to figure out how to find those. And that's it.